Okay, so I'm just going to jump into the resume, and this resume will be utilized for a bunch of different things going into the spring of junior year. First and foremost, you will use this resume when requesting letters of recommendation. Start thinking about 2 teachers that you would ask from this year for a letter of recommendation. Certainly nothing that you want to start now, but just start thinking about who you might want to ask. I will do a separate session on letter of recommendation writing to walk you through that entire process. So don't worry about it yet, but this is the first step of that process, is developing that college resume. So you'll be utilizing it for that process, but you'll also be using it for all of your applications. And you will also be utilizing it for scholarship applications in junior year. This time senior year, you'll be applying for independent scholarships, which oftentimes require a resume. So I'm briefly going to review. Many of you should have a resume. Maybe you did it in ties. So dust off the cobwebs of your ties resume and get that back out and take a look at it. You can either use your existing resume that you had from ties, or you can embellish, develop, add, or just start over. So what is the most important thing to emphasize in your resume? Just keep in mind that admissions representatives are not going to read the entire resume typically. They're just going to scan it really quickly. So my advice is, when you're developing your resume, you want to make sure that the most impressive things are listed first. And I'll show you some formats that you can utilize to do that. But think about yourself as a student. What are your strengths? What are your most impressive things? Are you focused more on athletics? Are you focused more on the arts? So, or maybe you're, an AP scholar, so you're gonna highlight that first. Or maybe you were, I don't know, first varsity 8 vote on crew last year. Well, not last year, but the year before. So those are the things that you want to think about when developing the resume. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, how do you use your resume, or what is the purpose? It's essentially letting the college or university know what makes you tick. What are you involved in? What are you passionate about? And then ultimately, what are you going to bring to that college campus? So it's really important that you brag about yourself. This is your opportunity to say, this is how amazing I am, this is what I have to offer, and this is what I can bring to the table. It just is a quick snapshot of your personality and, again, what you're going to offer the college or university. They don't want students that don't have anything on their resume. In fact, a few years ago, I had a student apply to a competitive college, and it was a very, very strong student, checked the boxes for SATs or ACTs and grades and strength of schedule, but certainly didn't have anything on their resume. Now, you might be thinking, how can I add to my resume during COVID? There's so many great opportunities online. You can get involved in national organizations online. You can register for their virtual meetings. You can do food drives. You can get creative in this process if you feel like your resume is a little light. There are things that you can do. And if you're struggling with coming up with ideas, I'm always available as a resource to give you some ideas and walk you through that. So don't feel like all is lost. If you feel like your resume is light, you still have opportunity and time to add things to that resume. So what should be included in the resume? Obviously, you need your name, your address, your email, and a cell phone number. Now, with the email address, it's very important, if you had an email address since maybe middle school and it sort of has like a childish connotation, maybe it's like Surfer Girl 12, you definitely want to update that email address and make it more professional, preferably with your name in it, and utilize that email address for all of your college things, your SAT registrations or ACT registrations, your resume, your applications, and any kind of financial aid paperwork, just so all your college things are right in the same spot. But definitely make it professional. You also want to include your academics. Ocean City High School, graduation date doesn't have to be the specific day. It could just be June 2022. GPA, you would want to highlight that if you have a strong GPA. If you don't have a strong GPA, it is not required that you put it on your resume. Again, like I said earlier, you want to emphasize the most impressive things about yourself first. Academic awards and recognition, honor roll, distinguished honors, anything that might have come up. student of the month, anything like that, any kind of summer experiences. And again, if they're virtual, that's fine. Don't hold back. And then the heart of your resume is going to be work experience, community service, any kind of extracurricular things, athletics, clubs, the arts, whatever it is that you do with your time. And then you can also put special skills, like some students earned a seal of high literacy, some students have done CPR training and they want to include that, or they're working on firefighter 1 and a volunteer experience. That would be the heart of the resume. So cardinal rules of resume writing, definitely want to keep it to 1 to 2 pages. And if you're actually printing out your resume, I don't know if anybody's seen the movie Legally Blonde, but she printed out her resume on pink paper with perfume on it. Certainly don't want to do that. Just keep it simple, white paper, nothing fancy. Make sure that it's grammatically correct. I mean, you have complete control over that. Some mistakes that students make, they put graphics to make it look nice, or they don't organize it. They don't use bullet points, or it's all over the place. And I've had some really, really strong students create such a busy resume that you couldn't even read it. So simplicity is a good thing in a resume. Using strong action verbs, and I have another slide that has some samples of what words you could use. You want a readable font. So if you have a lot of activities and you're trying to squeeze it in on a 10 font, that doesn't make sense. I would just minimize what you're putting on there, and rather than putting a really small font, because you need to be able to read it. And of course, you would never want to lie on your resume. Here are some power words that you can use on your resume, and I can send you all this PowerPoint along with the recording if you want to go back and watch it. You could also Google resume power words and it comes up, but you can see, you know, some strength in some of those words. And you only have about 10 to 15 seconds to impress an admissions representative with your resume. So you want the words to really stand out and be strong. So I'm going to hop into the resume worksheet. You can find this on the post-secondary planning guide. It's in the back. Before we hang up, I'll show you all where to find the post-secondary planning guide. There's some sample resumes in there. There's a worksheet that you can utilize. And I also have 2 sample resumes that I'll send in my email that you can take a look at. One's really super involved and one's a little bit more of a basic resume, depending on where you fall with your activities. This particular sample, obviously we wouldn't have class rank. And this SAT score is when it used to be out of 2,400. So obviously that's not correct. But what I like about this activity list is this is for the student that is really involved in a lot of activities. It shows the admissions office how you spend your time. This student spends a lot of time on yearbook, 10 hours a week, 36 weeks per year. So that they can see, wow, this student is really invested in this activity. A lot of times athletes benefit from doing an activity list as well, because you might start, if you're a football player, you start your preseason in June and you go all the way past Thanksgiving. That's a lot of your time that you've dedicated to that particular sport. So sometimes students will choose to do this format just so they can showcase how busy they are and how they're managing it. Oops, sorry. Here's a more traditional resume, and you can even search, you could utilize, Google has some templates that you can just type in. Naviance has the resume builder. I'm not a huge fan of the way that Naviance's resume builder looks when you print it out, but you could certainly use that as a jumping off point. But this is your more traditional resume. You can see the objective, certainly not required unless you feel you want to have that in there. But the education, like we talked about, awards, interests, and activities. I would like to see this resume a little bit more developed, because Key Club obviously does a ton of things. So, you know, I would highlight under here some of the different activities you do, since this Red Raider doesn't have a whole lot on their resume to begin with. He's down to 1 page already. So this could be embellished. The captain, you know, obviously, maybe put some accolades there, especially with the football team, their success this year, you know, maybe number of wins. National Honor Society, they are really involved with tutoring, volunteering. So this one's underdeveloped. So it's a good example to use to get started, and then you would want to fill it in with more detail. Again, you don't want to make it longer than 2 pages. Highlight the depth of your activities, which is what I just said. You don't want to just put Key Club if you're the president. You want to put the things that you've been involved in and the things you've done within that club or organization. And then you would want to use those strong action words to describe that. Focus on leadership and accomplishments and activities. Many students include middle school, and the only time that you would want to include middle school involvement is if you're still in it. For example, I know a lot of students start out with the dance place, maybe in 1st or 2nd grade, and they do it all through high school. That's amazing. Karate is another one that students do. Scouts, a lot of students do that throughout the years. So that would be fine to include, but certainly not something like National Junior Honor Society that you no longer are involved in. The format really doesn't matter. You can, like I said earlier, you can create your custom resume. You can build it on an existing format from Ty's freshman year, or you can start from scratch. The resume is your first impression. So you really want to put some time and energy into it. And as always, have somebody else read it before you submit it anywhere. I'm a big fan of thinking about it like this. If I give you something with my name on it that represents me, I want to be proud of it and know it's a really good product. So make sure that you have 1 or 2 other people look at it, because sometimes when you read your resume over and over again, you miss spelling errors or grammar errors. So it's really important that you have an extra set of eyes to double check to make sure there aren't any mistakes. So that's the basics of the resume. Like I said, I'll send out this video along with some samples and a link to the post-secondary planning guide that has that resume worksheet that will be really helpful for you if you have no idea where to start. The resume shouldn't take you a long time to complete, but it is a necessary document that you want to have prepared between now and the week after spring break. It should be completed so that we can start the request for letter of recommendation process. So that covers resumes. And now I'm going to just kind of touch on factors considered in the admissions process. Many of you are really starting to think about this, especially as juniors. In the spring semester of junior year, we're sort of in crunch time. Obviously, the #1 factor that colleges and universities are going to look at when evaluating you for admissions is your transcript. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what a transcript is, it's basically every course that you've taken, 9th, 10th, 11th, and then it will show your courses in progress for 12th grade. So it'll show your final grade for every single course, every single year. It will also show your GPA for freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year, as well as your cumulative GPA. It also shows how courses are weighted, what courses are weighted, and our grading scale. So it has a lot of really good information to share with the colleges and universities. But that is the #1 factor when colleges and universities are evaluating you. Now, keep in mind that if you're looking at really competitive colleges and you haven't met the requirements in your transcript, that's okay, because there's going to be plenty of colleges and universities where your transcript is perfect to meet their requirements. You wouldn't want to go to a college or university where you're going to get too overwhelmed academically, as well as underwhelmed. So the transcript is a really, really useful tool, and it helps you as well as the admissions office. Also keep in mind that admissions offices are in the business of wanting to accept you. So most colleges that, in the country accept more than 75 to 80% of the students who apply. So and there's very rare where a college or university only accepts 20 to 30%, or in Harvard's case, 8%. That's a very, very rare occurrence. Most colleges accept way more students than they deny. So that covers the transcript. Test scores, this is going to be a great area for your graduating class as well. We're seeing some trends of colleges continuing the test optional or test blind. Test optional means you can send your scores and they will consider them, or you don't have to and it won't hurt you. Test blind schools don't want scores at all, and you don't even have to worry about it whatsoever. So in the event of a test optional school, you can take a look at the scattergrams on Naviance to try to determine whether your score will help you or hurt you. And certainly myself and the school counselors could help you make those decisions as well if you're not sure. So first two things, transcripts, your strength of schedule, how difficult were your courses, how did you do, did you increase your GPA and your strength of schedule every year? If you did, that's great. If you didn't and you have a bump in the road, that's where we would recommend students schedule a virtual interview. So if there's something that happened throughout high school that really impacted you negatively on your transcript and it's kind of obvious, that's when you'd want to schedule an interview to walk that admissions person through your transcript so that they understand what happened and what the circumstances were. And again, if you need help figuring that out, we are here to support you. Tier 2 in the admissions consideration are your teacher evaluations, your college essay, and your resume. And the great news about Tier 2 is all of you still have a lot of control over these things. The resume we just reviewed, we just briefly went over what you would want to consider when revising, editing, or creating your resume. The teacher evaluations, we are going to talk more about that later after spring break, but just like I said, they try to think about 2 core academic teachers that you would like to request a letter of recommendation from. Certainly nothing that you want to do now. And then the college essay, in 4th marking period, towards the end of the school year, your English teacher will be assigning you the college essay to work on and will be helping you in that process as early as the 4th marking period. I have read a ton of college essays and can certainly review your essay if you want another pair of eyes to give you an opinion. I don't review essays based on an English teacher or grammatical perspective. It's more on an admissions perspective. So I can look at your essay and give you feedback and say, yes, this sounds like you, or you didn't answer the question, which is the #1 mistake high school students make when writing their college essay. But certainly you'll have a lot of support on that and you have a lot of control over it because we haven't even started them yet. And then finally, Tier 3 is considered in the admissions process. Maybe you're applying to a college or university that doesn't have a lot of Cape May County applicants or New Jersey applicants. Maybe your last name is Trump and you've donated a building to that campus. That certainly can help. Sometimes legacy helps. Maybe you have a parent or a grandparent that attended a college or university. Maybe you play the oboe and they lost their oboe player to graduation. Maybe you're doing some kind of athletics for that particular college or university. Maybe you are someone who excels in the arts and they have a need for someone like that in their architecture program. So there's a lot of different factors that are considered in the application process. The other thing that I didn't include on here, which sometimes can be a Tier 2, is your admissions decision, meaning, did you apply early decision? If you applied early decision, that basically means that if you get accepted to that college or university, you have to go there your first year. Why would that help you in the application process? Well, it's basically telling the college or university, you are my #1 choice, and if I get accepted, I'm coming there. For example, the University of Pennsylvania accepts 40% of their incoming freshman class through early decision. So they have a higher acceptance rate in the early decision. But that is really a family decision. So if you and your family are not 100% on board financially, academically, socially, emotionally for that college, then I would not recommend early decision. But sometimes that can help in the process. Also, early action is a great thing too, and we're going to go over admissions terminology in greater detail next week. But early action basically is you apply early, you find out early. So you might apply on or before November 1st of next year and find out around winter break whether or not you were accepted. Sometimes that can help you get admitted because you're on top of things, you've applied early. And then rolling admissions can sometimes impact you if you apply later on because they might have filled the class before you actually applied. So sometimes the admissions deadline that you choose can impact whether or not you're accepted. So I know I talked a lot longer than I have in the prior weeks. I apologize for that. I'm going to stop my screen share, and I'm going to also stop the recording so I can open it up for Q&A.